back, everyone. Josh Weber here with Big Red Jelly. We help brand build and grow businesses by combining human creativity with digital tools and solutions. So we like to help businesses grow, in particular, small businesses. That's kind of the theme of our content for 2021. I really do believe that 2021 is going to be the comeback year for small and local businesses. So today's video is a little bit more personal, I think. It's for all of you small business owners out there, entrepreneurs, maybe managers, people who help run businesses across the globe and the United States. What I wanted to cover today are 3 lessons or tactics that I employ that help me get more work done. Simple as that. They help me be more efficient. They help me be more productive. Employing these 3 tactics helped me significantly improve the amount of stuff that I get done every week. And not just stuff, but important action items and projects that actually move our business forward, right? I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but being busy doesn't necessarily mean being productive. Let me jump into number 1. What's the first tactic that I employed that just helped me get more done, help me be more productive? Number 1, make your calendar your friend. I love that phrase. It's a little bit of a cliche, maybe. You hear that every now and then, but I cannot express this enough to those of you who either don't use your calendar maybe as much as you should, or your calendar is more just a place where it has your meetings for the next day. It can be so much more than that, and let me explain exactly what. So, first of all, I've learned various parts of the day where I feel like I'm more productive. One of the really bad habits that I used to have was I would have my email tab almost always pulled up while I was at work. So as soon as I came into work until the minute I left, I have my email tab pulled up, and you can even see that number in the parentheses up there. And every time it would go up a notch, I just had that impulse to go click it, see who's emailing. And when I was doing that, my entire day felt reactive. I was reacting to every possible incoming email. And at the end of the day, how did I feel? I felt like I didn't really move the ball forward in any significant way. I felt like I answered a lot of requests. I answered a lot of questions. I was able to kind of put out a lot of fires, but it did not feel like a productive day. So instead, I've made my calendar work for me, where I close that email tab, and instead I have 2, maybe 3 short email blocks, right? So one I have as soon as I come into the office. I do like to check my email first thing. That might be different for other people. I've actually heard some people say they do not recommend opening their email first thing, work on a project first. It really comes down to your personal preference, in my opinion. I'm the type of guy where when I come in, I do have to open that inbox. I will not open it at home, right? I will not wake up and open it up on my phone. I just think that's a bad idea, because I'm not realistically going to be able to solve any issues while I'm at home and on my phone or going through my morning routine. So why even put that, that anxiety upon yourself when you can't handle it effectively anyway? So I really hesitate to log into my email on my phone ever, actually. That's a separate conversation. But once I get to the office and I open up my laptop, I'm situated, I'm ready, then I can dive into my email, and I usually spend 30 to 45 minutes just going through those immediate emails. I respond to the ones that are urgent. I schedule time for other ones that are not as urgent but are important, etc. And then what I do is I have a small block of time, maybe in the late afternoon, kind of that lull period where I don't have a lot of calls anyway. And then I'll have one more block of emails before I go home for the night, just to clear my inbox. That might be too much for some people. I do like to reply to all emails within 24 hours. But that has really helped me. And then in between those small little checkpoints is stuff for me to just get stuff done. And one thing I have learned is that for the most part, as human beings, we're usually overly optimistic with our to-do lists. In other words, we will think we can get 20 things done tomorrow, and we'll really only get 10 things done because there's so many unforeseen things that always pop up, right? So I've always learned as well to block off some time in my calendar for just those unforeseen things. And trust me, it always fills up. So I never kind of block back to back to back to back to back meetings the next day and say, "Ooh, that day is going to be great," because you're also not going to get done some emergency situations that might come up. So give yourself that flexibility. I've kind of found that balance for me where I know exactly how many calls, client calls, reviews I want to be on in a day, and I know my email blocks, and then I know my flexible time for unforeseen circumstances, and then the rest of my time are major projects that I'm focusing on and I know I want to get done. And based on what I said in my last video, it's much more effective for me to just pick my top 2 or 3 biggest projects or action items for that day and just make sure I get those done instead of 20 smaller things. One practice I've been using recently is I will write down the top 20 things I have to get done tomorrow, circle the top 3 or 4, and delegate the rest, or really rethink about even doing those things. Are you just looking for things to do to be busy? You might not be productive. So that's number one. Make your calendar your friend. On that note, too, something I've done that's really effective for me is I will not have calls probably the first 2 or 3 hours of Monday morning and the last 2 or 3 hours of Friday. And I know that sounds like, well, Josh, it's probably just because you want a long weekend. No, it's really so I like to have time when moving into my work week to assess major projects, have extra time for unforeseen circumstances that happened over the weekend. And then on Friday, I like that extra time to review my week, review my team's action items, do some important updates and note taking, and just take an account for my entire week. My weeks feel chaotic and my weekends are not nearly as enjoyable when I have calls all the way up until 5, 6 p.m. on Friday. It's just I've seen a stark difference in even my weekend enjoyment. And same thing with Monday. Don't put that pressure on yourself where it's Sunday night and you're just dreading that call that you've got at 9 a.m. the next day on Monday, and that's how you're going to start your week. Just don't have that an availability. And I know that's different for everyone, but if you can, if you are flexible in that regard, make your calendar your friend. You will be more productive that way. So there's several other things that I do on my calendar that I found to be really effective. I won't go into them right now, but I'm happy to chat with anyone who's listening. I always love to see what other people do, just in terms of personal kind of time management. It's an interesting topic. So number 2, ignore the conventional and listen to your body. I am not a health expert. I'm not going to dive too much into this, and I'm sure that there's so much science and opinion, but I'm going to tell you what's worked for me. And it took me a long time to learn this. There's the typical American work week, right? 9 to 5, you wake up, you get to work at 9, you clock out at 5, or even nowadays, especially in the entrepreneurial world, small business world, it's even wider, is much wider, right? 7 a.m. to goodness knows how late into the evening. But what I found is for a while, I was trying to match what was typical. In other words, it was, hey, you've got to be really grinding as soon as you're in the office. You got to have calls at 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. and you got to be doing this, that, and the other. There's going to be days like that no matter what. I do accommodate to our clients, for example, overall. However, I've learned how my body works through the day. I've never been a morning person. That doesn't mean that I don't show up to work before 9, but what it means is, for me personally, I'll just be transparent. I like to come in before 9. I try to be in here at 8 for one particular reason. I like to be ahead of the 9 a.m. kind of influx of messages and emails and requests, even from our own team. So that's an important, going back to number 1, making your calendar your friend. I just like to be, if I come in at 9:05, that small difference, coming in at 9:05 and coming in at 8:45, is very different day for me, right? If I'm come in right before 9 when the typical work day starts, I just am proactive when I come in a little bit earlier, and I'm reactive if I come in at 9:05. But going back to ignore the conventional, listen to your body. Again, I was following kind of this conventional, model. But over time, I started to, I did this thing for a while where I would go home and I would have dinner. I would try to get some type of exercise, and I'd come back to the office during kind of those really startup years, which are necessary for many people. I would come back to the office and I had this kind of second surge of energy, which I'm sure some of you have felt. I'm kind of a night owl. I felt more creative. I felt energetic. And doing a little bit more research and talking to some people, I think that my cortisol levels would even increase during that time. I felt that kind of second wind. There's a lot of terms for it, but I found that if I could power through my afternoon slump, which was much later than most people. For me, it's between 5 and 7 p.m. is when I get that wall of fatigue, and I have an immediate decision to make. I either go lay down on the couch and inevitably end up watching hours of NBA highlights, and then I never get back to the office, or I eat dinner as soon as I get back and I just immediately get changed and do some type of exercise, go to the gym. I bypass that kind of tired window, and then by 8 I'm back to that kind of creative level. So I like to have what I like to call kind of my second work session, where it's purely just creative thinking, long-term thinking, goal setting, etc. I don't condone that for everyone. I think it's important to turn off, but I like to have that second window. The point that I'm trying to make is I kind of listen to what works best for me. And so in the morning, instead of getting right into a lot of work that requires a lot of focus, like client calls or creative projects, I would move certain tasks that were more autopilot for me, like following up with the team on certain things, adjusting my notes, adjusting my calendar, preparing my calendar, things that I could really just plug and chug. I moved those things to the time of day where I'm not performing the best in creatively, right? So don't force yourself into certain areas of the day just because conventionally that's what's done. Find what works best for you, and you'll be more productive. And I am a firm believer that I think over the next couple decades, to be honest with you, we're going to see a lot of changes in the work week and what's typical in the workspace. This 9 to 5, go to the office, you work here, you sit here, you clock in here, you clock out there. I think that's going to look very different in the next few years. COVID-19 has kind of opened a lot of people's eyes to that, especially working virtually. But I think it's also opened many eyes to people have different schedules. People's bodies are different. There's a reason that some people are classified as early birds and night owls, or, and we can't just keep ignoring that. So listen to your body, experiment, try different things, and see what works best for you. When are you the most creative? When are you not? Adjust your calendar accordingly. All right, moving on to number 3. Remember the Pareto Principle. The Pareto Principle states that for many outcomes, roughly 80% of consequences come from 20% of the causes. Other names for this principle are the 80-20 rule, the law of vital few, or the principle of factor sparsity. So many of you have heard of this. Let me give you a couple examples of the Pareto Principle in real life. It's a fascinating principle. So just a little extra background here. This is from HeFlow. It's a website, some really neat articles. Vilfredo de Pareto was an Italian sociologist and economist who, during his studies, realized that in general, 80% of a nation's income was in the hands of only 20% of the population. And here's some other examples. 20% of criminals commit 80% of crimes. 20% of drivers cause 80% of all traffic accidents. 80% of pollution originates from 20% of all factories. 20% of companies' products represent 80% of sales. Very interesting. 20% of employees are responsible for 80% of the results. 20% of students have grades 80% or higher. So it's this universal principle of that 80-20 rule. And there's so many ways this could apply to your work life. Obviously, you're probably already thinking, but it goes back to that to-do list, at least for me. When I write down my 10 things, let's say, 20% of those are going to move the ball forward 80% more than the other. Like, I'm going to be 20% of those to-do things are going to result in 80% of the production of Big Red Jelly or my time. So why not focus more on that 20%, right? And that goes for your calendar. That goes for your to-dos the next day. That goes for your meetings. That goes for your priorities for the week, month, year. 20% of whatever all that stuff is, try and find that 20% that ultimately is going to lead to 80% of your growth. It's always interesting to do this mental exercise. If stop right now where you are and kind of reflect and say, okay, look back on the last year, 2 years, 3 years of your business or your startup, whatever you're working on, your team, and think to yourself, if you could really chalk it up to 2 or 3 major decisions, major changes, services, pricing changes, campaigns, think about the top 2 or 3 things that moved your business forward the fastest or pushed in the biggest, that helped it take the biggest step. I've done this practice many times, and I really can start to write down a short list of things that we did at Big Red Jelly that seemed to make 80% of the difference. So I think doing that exercise more frequently helps us remember, hey, what's the next 20%, right? Seeing that we did that and that made 80% of the difference. What can I do now? What can I focus on the 20%? What's the 20% I can focus on now? That's going to do the same 80% result moving forward. It's a fascinating thing to think about, and it really helps you refine and delegate, focus on as a decision maker and the business owner what is most important and what's going to help your company move forward. So I hope this helps someone out there be more productive. Just to review, number 1, make your calendar your friend. Number 2, ignore the conventional and listen to your body or what works best for you, your energy levels, your focus, etc. Be creative. Think outside the box. You have to in order to compete in today's world. And then number 3, remember the Pareto Principle. That can also be your friend, and you can use it to your benefit. That's it from me, guys. Tune in next time on Monday. Thank you.